Every data center powering the internet, every electric vehicle charging station from Shanghai to San Francisco, every hospital keeping patients alive through the night, all of it runs on an idea that Thomas Edison spent millions of dollars trying to destroy. The newspapers called it the executioner's current, and Edison electrocuted dogs and horses in public demonstrations to prove the danger. He helped design the first electric chair using my system specifically, so the public would associate alternating current with death, and still I knew he would lose. Edison was fighting against something more powerful than money or public relations, because he was fighting against nature itself. When you understand what alternating current actually is, not the textbook definition but the deep principle underneath, you will see that Edison never had a chance. The modern world could not have been built any other way, and the device charging your phone, the motors in your refrigerator, and the transformers on every street corner all operate on a vision I saw complete in my mind during what my physicians believed was a nervous breakdown. The year was 1882, and I was walking through a park in Budapest at sunset, after months of illness, though this was not ordinary illness but something stranger. My senses had become so acute that I could hear a watch ticking 3 rooms away, and the vibration of a carriage passing in the street felt like physical blows against my body. Sunlight was painful, and my physicians did not expect me to recover. What they did not understand, what I only realized later, was that the same nervous system, making ordinary sensation unbearable, had been preparing me to perceive something most minds cannot grasp. I could feel electromagnetic fields the way others feel heat, and the invisible had become visible. That evening, as the sun descended and painted the sky in gold and crimson, I was reciting poetry to a friend, lines from Goethe's Faust about the setting sun and the wish to follow it around the earth forever, and that's when the solution appeared. Not as a vague notion, not as a theory requiring years of development, but complete and perfect. A rotating magnetic field, 2 currents out of phase with each other, a motor with no commutator, no brushes, no sparking mechanical contacts to wear out and fail. I could see it turning in empty air. I could trace every line of force, and I fell to my knees and drew diagrams in the sand with a stick while my friend watched in bewilderment. Michael Faraday had discovered electromagnetic induction decades before, the principle that a changing magnetic field creates electrical current, and James Clerk Maxwell had written the mathematics unifying electricity and magnetism into a single force. But here's the thing, no one had seen what I saw that evening, how to make that force rotate continuously using nothing but the natural behavior of alternating currents. I did not invent the rotating magnetic field. I discovered it, the way one discovers a mountain that was always there but hidden in clouds. Understanding why this discovery changed everything requires understanding what Edison had built and why it was doomed from the start. His system used direct current, electricity flowing in one direction like water through a pipe, which is how batteries work and how the first power stations operated. Edison built his Pearl Street station in Manhattan in 1882, the same year I had my vision in Budapest, and he powered a small district of New York with direct current from coal-fired generators. The problem was distance. Pushing electrical current through a wire means resistance fights you, and energy bleeds away as heat with every foot of wire. Delivering meaningful power over any distance with direct current requires cables as thick as a man's arm, copper so expensive that only the wealthiest neighborhoods could afford connection, and even then your power station must sit within a mile of every customer. What that meant was every neighborhood requiring its own generating plant, every city becoming a patchwork of small, inefficient stations burning coal in the middle of residential streets. The smoke and noise would have made any metropolis unlivable, and Edison's vision was not electrification but 1,000 tiny electrical islands, each isolated and dependent on proximity to a belching generator. Another way existed. Increasing the voltage of electricity for transmission, pushing it at thousands of volts instead of hundreds, meant the same power could travel through much thinner wires over vastly greater distances, and at the destination you would reduce the voltage back to safe, usable levels. But here's the thing. Edison either did not understand or refused to accept. With direct current, you cannot easily change voltage, because the machines required are massive and expensive and waste enormous energy. Direct current is trapped at whatever voltage you generate it, while alternating current has no such limitation. Picture a wave on the ocean rising and rising again in continuous oscillation. Alternating current behaves the same way, the electricity surging forward, then reversing, then surging back, 60 times per second in the American grid and 50 in Europe. 60 complete cycles, 120 reversals, every single second across the entire system without stopping. What that oscillation allows is what makes alternating current superior in every way that matters. When alternating current flows through a coil of wire, it creates a magnetic field that also oscillates, growing and collapsing and reversing in rhythm with the current. Place a second coil of wire nearby, not touching and completely separate, and that pulsing magnetic field will induce a current in the second coil. Energy transfers through empty space carried by magnetism alone, and the insight that changes everything is this. The voltage in that second coil depends on how many turns of wire it contains compared to the first. More turns in the second coil means higher voltage. Fewer turns means lower voltage. And with nothing but 2 coils of wire and a core of iron, You can transform electricity from any voltage to any other voltage with 98% efficiency, almost no energy lost. This device, the transformer, is why alternating current conquered the world. Power generated at Niagara Falls can reach New York City because of it, and a single power plant can serve millions of customers across hundreds of miles because of it. Generate electricity, step up the voltage to hundreds of thousands of volts for efficient long-distance transmission. Then step it down at substations and again at transformers on every street corner until it reaches your wall at a safe 120 volts. No complex machinery, no moving parts, just coils of wire exploiting the natural behavior of oscillating magnetic fields. Edison understood none of this, or maybe he understood, and the understanding frightened him. What the newspapers called the war of currents was never about science or safety, it was about money. Edison had invested millions in direct current infrastructure, the power stations and wiring and manufacturing capacity to produce DC equipment, and when George Westinghouse approached me in 1888 and licensed my patents for the polyphase alternating current system, Edison saw his empire threatened. What followed was a campaign of fear. Edison paid a man named Harold Brown to travel the country electrocuting animals with alternating current, dogs and calves and horses dying in public demonstrations meant to prove its danger. Edison lobbied for the first electric chair to use Westinghouse's AC equipment, so the press would link alternating current with execution forever. He spread the word that AC was the death current, unsafe for homes and dangerous to touch. What Edison left out of his demonstrations is that any electrical system can kill at sufficient voltage. Direct current is not safer. It simply cannot deliver power efficiently over distance, which forces DC systems to operate at lower voltages near customers, not because DC is inherently gentler, but because the economics forced it. While Edison staged his demonstrations, I was building motors. The motors that existed in the 1880s all required direct current and used commutators, mechanical switches that reversed the current's direction at precisely the right moment to keep the motor spinning. These commutators wore out and sparked and required constant maintenance, and every motor was a machine with a built-in point of failure, a mechanical weakness guaranteeing eventual breakdown. What I saw in Budapest was a motor without this flaw, a motor that runs on alternating current directly with no commutator, no brushes, no mechanical switching of any kind. The principle works like this. If you take two or more alternating currents that are slightly out of step with each other, what we call out of phase, and you arrange their coils properly around a circular space, their combined magnetic fields will rotate, not pulse, not oscillate in place, but rotate smoothly and continuously like an invisible wheel of pure force spinning in empty air. Place a simple rotor in the center of that rotating field, nothing more than a drum of copper or iron, and the rotating magnetism will drag it along through electromagnetic induction. The rotor spins, work is done, and there is no physical contact between the stationary outer coils and the spinning center. Nothing wears out, nothing requires maintenance. This is the induction motor, patent number 381,968, granted to me on the 1st of May, 1888, and it runs your world. Your refrigerator, your washing machine, your air conditioner, your vacuum cleaner, your dishwasher, every one contains an induction motor descended directly from my designs. The factories that manufactured every object you own are filled with thousands of these motors running day and night, decade after decade, with no brushes to replace and no commutators to rebuild. The durability alone transformed industry, because a well-built induction motor can run for 40 years without service. The rotating magnetic field has no physical substance, no friction, no parts to degrade, and it is geometry made manifest, invisible force doing visible work. The polyphase system, using 3 alternating currents instead of 2 with each separated by 1/3 of a cycle, proved even more elegant. 3-phase power generates a rotating field of perfect smoothness, delivering constant torque with no pulsation, which is why the largest industrial motors run on 3-phase current and why the transmission grid itself uses 3 conductors, 3 currents flowing in eternal mathematical coordination. In 1893, Westinghouse Electric and I illuminated the world's Columbian Exposition in Chicago, 250,000 incandescent lamps powered entirely by alternating current. The fairgrounds blazed like a vision of the future, while Edison's direct current system could only have lit a few city blocks at such distance from a power source. Visitors who had never seen electric light stared at buildings outlined against the night sky, and they called it the White City. Niagara Falls came 2 years later, one of the great natural wonders of the world, hundreds of thousands of cubic feet of water plunging every second, more power than any city had ever consumed, and we captured it. Not with a small generator at the base of the falls, but with a system capable of sending that power to Buffalo 26 miles away, and eventually to New York City itself. The Niagara Falls Power Company generators were the largest ever built, each one producing 5,000 horsepower, and they used my polyphase system, my induction principles, my rotating magnetic field. Transmission lines stretched across the countryside, carrying electricity at 11,000 volts, a killing voltage, Edison would have said, except that transformers reduced it to safe levels the moment it reached its destination. The 16th of November, 1896, was the day the switch was thrown, and when the lights of Buffalo blazed with power from a waterfall 26 miles distant, the war of currents ended. Not with a surrender, but with a demonstration so overwhelming that argument became pointless. Westinghouse had proven the technology, I had provided the principles, and Edison's direct current system became obsolete in a single evening. What I saw in Budapest became the nervous system of civilization itself, not a single principle but an integrated system. Generators producing polyphase alternating current at power plants, transformers raising the voltage for efficient transmission, high-tension lines spanning continents, transformers lowering the voltage at substations and on street corners, and induction motors converting electrical energy into mechanical work wherever it is needed. Every element designed to work with every other, every piece depending on the oscillating and reversing and phase-shifting nature of alternating current, a system so robust that its basic architecture has remained unchanged for more than a century. The power plant you rely on today, whether it burns coal or splits atoms or captures wind or concentrates sunlight, still generates electricity the same way. A rotating magnetic field inside a coil of wire, the turbine spinning, the field rotating, alternating current flowing. The generators have grown larger and more efficient, but the principle I demonstrated in 1888 has never been improved upon because it cannot be improved upon. It is not an invention but a discovery, a fundamental relationship between electricity and magnetism that existed before the Earth formed and will exist long after humanity is gone. What I find most remarkable is this. Your heart is a direct current system, steady electrochemical pulses keeping you alive, and your brain operates on tiny DC voltages of perhaps 70 millivolts. Biology chose direct current for the signals inside your body, but to transmit power across miles and continents, nature's own laws require alternating current. The universe uses both systems, each for its proper purpose, and so does the grid. Engineers today debate whether direct current will make a resurgence, and they have reasons for asking. Solar panels generate DC, batteries store DC, and electric vehicles run on DC motors. The electronics in your phone and laptop all operate internally on direct current, and some say the future belongs to Edison's principle after all. What they fail to understand is that every solar panel, every battery system, every electric vehicle still plugs into my alternating current grid. The DC power must convert to AC for transmission, then often back to DC at its destination. The infrastructure connecting everything, the 4 trillion kilowatt-hours flowing through American wires each year, the synchronized grids spanning continents, all of it remains alternating current. All of it remains my rotating magnetic field. The War of Currents ended in 1896, and everything since has been negotiating the terms of AC's victory. My dreams went further than what exists today. The tower I built at Wardenclyffe on Long Island was meant to transmit power without wires at all, energy broadcast across the globe, available to anyone with a receiver, the entire Earth united by electromagnetic force. J.P. Morgan withdrew his funding before I could complete the experiments, and the tower was demolished. My final years passed in a New York hotel room feeding pigeons in the park, while the system I created powered the city around me. Westinghouse had offered me royalties of $2.50 for every horsepower generated by my patents, and had I kept that agreement, I would have become the wealthiest person in history as the world electrified. When Westinghouse Electric faced financial difficulties, I tore up the contract to save the company and the system we had built together. Almost nothing remained when I died, but every time you flip a switch, the lights still come on. Alternating current is not a technology, it is not an invention. It is a discovery about the nature of electromagnetic force, that oscillation enables transformation, that phase relationships create rotation, that invisible mathematical relationships can spin motors and light cities and connect continents. You do not live in a world powered by coal or uranium or natural gas. You live inside a rotating magnetic field that spans the globe, synchronized and endless, 60 cycles per second in perfect coordination. That field existed before I saw it in Budapest, and it will exist after the last human city goes dark. I simply showed you where to look.